Hello YouTube. I will talk about Lake Vostok today. I want to bring up information that's known in Russia but not widely. I have collected and monitored information about Lake Vostok for years, and I want to clear up some misconceptions about this lake and present information I think totally unknown in the West to an extent. And I've been following up on at least two very important Russian researchers of this unusual place on our planet. So I will put in my own views during this video presentation, because I think we are being given a lot of unclear or even incorrect information when it comes to this lake. I want you to put aside any sensations that you might have heard and open your minds, and let's see what I know about this lake. After the discovery of Antarctica in January of 1820, Russia, for almost 100 years, was practically not interested in this southern continent. They decided to correct this strange situation in the mid-1950s, when scientists around the world announced the International Geophysical Year, within which it was decided to pay attention to the study of Antarctica, which until then had been very poorly studied. Initially, the Soviet Union wanted to open a station at the point of the South Pole. However, the Soviet delegate, which is the official story, was late for the conference in Paris, where the issue was being resolved, and the South Pole was already occupied by the Americans, so to say, where now is the Amundsen Scott Station. When it comes to the years 1946 and on, and Antarctica, I have presented some information in my other videos, and I'll talk more about it, because this was one of the strangest periods of our history pertaining to Antarctica. And I will present more information in my other videos, but keep this in mind. Well, the Soviet leaders decided that they will take the South Geomagnetic Pole, not to be confused with magnetic. These are two different things. In February of 1956, the first Soviet station in Antarctica, Mirny, was opened. On December 16, 1957, the flag was hoisted at the Vostok station, about 1,400 kilometers deep into the continent from that station Mirny. Well, what happens is that in advance, without measurements in place, the position of the geomagnetic pole can only be determined very approximately. Therefore, this is why the station was delivered to at this particular point, which is just unknown. One of the unknowns related to Soviet and now Russian Antarctica. The first station has long been under a thick layer of snow, although you can still get there. The present Vostok station was built in the second half of the 1970s, but these buildings are now covered with snow up to the roof. This lake is among the last unexplored places on Earth. Dark, deep, and mysterious, as the foreigners view it. The Russian station Vostok is located in the central part of East Antarctica, near the South Pole, at altitude of 78 degrees and an altitude of about 3,500 meters above sea levels. And it is because of this there are such harsh weather conditions in that territory. The average annual temperature is about minus 55 Celsius, and in the winter months it drops to almost minus 70 Celsius, and in the summer the air warms up to minus 32 Celsius on the average. In the 1980s, the lowest temperature on our planet was recorded at the Vostok, around minus 89 Celsius. The lake has been ice covered for at least 15 million years, cut off from light and contact with the atmosphere. It is one of the most extreme environments on our planet. Once a large surface lake in East Antarctica, Lake Vostok is now buried more than 2 miles of ice near the station itself. Yeah, there are isolated stations in the Antarctic, such as Vostok, and only journalists can come there. For example, by the way, a very good movie about the Russian explorers was shot there and shown in Russian television. Now, scientists from different countries come there from time to time, but not to visit, they work. And we don't really know about the joint expedition missions, but we do know some, enough to raise our curiosity. But for tourists, a visit to Vostok, it's basically complicated by climatic conditions, which are the harshest on Earth, and tourists are not welcome there. Vostok is the largest subglacial lake in Antarctica. 4 kilometers of ice sheet over it, and the depth of the lake itself is about 1.2 kilometers. The estimated area of more than 15,000 cubic kilometers is exactly half of Lake Baikal in Siberia. Another strange lake, and you can see a video about humanoids that populate it. I have it in my channel. But let's get back to Antarctica. The first to receive evidence that there may be water in the lake was a Soviet geographer and pilot Andrei Kapitsa in the 1960s. See, he noticed a large smooth patch of ice above the lake from the air. Airborne radar experiments by British and Russian researchers in 1996 confirmed the discovery of the unusual lake. We will get back to that year. I want to present to you the sequence of scientific exploration of the lake to the extent possible from open sources, because I think a lot of the information is just not being disclosed. One of the drilling projects was launched in January 1970. I say it because there are different dates. And on February 5, 2012, scientists at St. Petersburg Mining University reached the surface of the lake. In 1998, the International Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research recommended to suspend drilling for fear of disrupting the sub-ice ecosystem. First of all, we gotta make sure the year is correct, but also, in my opinion, the drilling was suspended for other reasons. Lake Vostok is the largest among the 400 subglacial lakes identified by radar and seismic surveys in Antarctica. The area of Lake Vostok is about 15,790 cubic kilometers, and the thickness of the ice sheet in the region of Lake Vostok varies from 950 to 4,350 meters. And the water tables, there are different, basically different measurements. Lake Vostok is at least 1,000 meters deep at the southern end and relatively shallow to the north and extreme southwest. The volume of the water in the lake is about 6,100 cubic kilometers, and the average depth is about 400 meters. And there may be several hundred meters of glacial sediment deposited on its floor. Now, the Soviet Antarctic Research Station Vostok was established in the center of East Antarctic ice sheet in 1957. The first drilling was carried out in 1958, when 4 boreholes were drilled with a hot point thermal drill to a maximum depth of 52 meters. Deep ice core drilling at Lake Vostok began in 1970, and during the 1970s a set of open uncased holes were drilled using a thermal drill system suspended on cables. The deepest dry hole in the ice reached 952.4 meters. It's hole number 1, May 1972. For drilling at greater depths, it was necessary to prevent hole closure by filling the borehole with a low temperature fluid. Therefore, from 1980, new thermal and electromechanical drill systems working in fluid were used. 2 boreholes reached depths of more than 2,000 meters. Now, hole number 3G-2 was extended to 2,201.7 meters in 1985, and hole number 4G-2 was extended to 2,546.4 meters in 1989. This is when the Soviet Union was coming to its end, basically. Drilling of a new deep hole, hole number 5G, started in February of 1990, 6 years before the large subglacial lake under Vostok station was officially recognized. And in February of 2012, Russian researchers made contact with Lake Vostok water at a depth of 3,769.3 meters. Opening a new scientific frontier lying under the Antarctic ice, Russian researchers have drilled down and finally reached the surface of the gigantic freshwater lake. The mission chief compared the achievement to placing a man on the moon. Drilling in the area of the lake began in 1990, but progressed slowly as a result of the funding shortages, equipment breakdowns, difficulties of drilling in the warm ice, and environmental concerns. In 1996, 6 years after the drilling was started, a group of Russian and British scientists discovered the lake to be one of the largest freshwater reservoirs on the planet. Sealed from the Earth's atmosphere for millions of years, it may provide vital information about microbial evolution, the past climate of the Earth, and the formation of the Antarctic ice sheet. Russian experts waited several years for international approval of their drilling technology before proceeding. That's very interesting, and it shows you the cooperation at the highest levels. As anticipated, lake water under the pressure rushed up to the borehole, pushing the drilling fluid up and away, and then froze, forming a protective plug that prevented contamination of the lake. Drilling of a deep hole at Vostok station was initiated in the 35th Soviet Antarctic expedition by a thermal method using Telga and TB3S types of drills. Now, during the 38th Russian Antarctic expedition, because there was no more Soviet Union, in 1993, the borehole 5G1 was reached at a depth of 27.55 meters. I told you that before, but I want you to pay attention to that borehole. Now, due to the insufficient funding of the 39th Russian Antarctic expedition, and underline it, some technical and organizational problems, the Vostok station was temporarily decommissioned and no drilling activities was carried out. So there was a time when they stopped. Something was going on in the back. This is how I interpret it, based on some, let's just say, knowledge that I have of Russia and so forth, and not only Russia. During the 40th Russian Antarctic expedition, 1995, drilling of borehole 5G1 was resumed from the depth of 2755 meters by the electric mechanical drill, and without any complications, the depth of the borehole 5G-1 was increased from 2755 meters to 3109 meters. After suspension of Vostok station operations during the 41st Russian Antarctic expedition, 1997, although I had another year in the beginning, they refer to 1998. No drilling operations were undertaken in the borehole 5G-1 in the winter periods. For the seasons, in the seasons of the 41st, 42nd, and 43rd Russian Antarctic expeditions, that would be from 1995 to 1998. The borehole 5G-1 was run from a depth of 3109 to 3623 meters, which is almost 600 meters as deep as the maximum depth achieved by specialists of European countries and the United States in drilling the boreholes under more favorable conditions of Greenland. Drilling of boreholes by European specialists was stopped due to accidents in this depth. I want you to understand, things are happening with these expeditions and drilling and so forth. Greenland has been in the news recently. United States wants to buy it. China, I believe, wants to do the same in its own way. And Russian submarines have been in the area. And in one of my videos, I present information about USOs from Greenland. Sorry. So the Europeans stopped operations. Something happened in the area of Greenland. To compensate for the overburden pressure, the European specialists use a drilling fluid similar to that used by Russia. Its composition includes aviation fuel of JP-8 type as the main component and Freon F-141B as a heavier. Some fluid is applied for drilling a deep hole at Dome C in Antarctica under the European program EPICA, which has achieved a depth of 1450 meters by February 1st, 2001. Now, drilling of the borehole was performed in the framework of the Russian-French-US program of deep drilling and ice core study at Vostok station. I'm telling you, there is definite cooperation at the top, as it should be when it comes to threats unknown to the rest of the population. And that's actually a source of comfort. In December of the next Antarctic season, 2012-2013, researchers plan to redrill the frozen sample of the subglacial water for analysis. So, we will get to the year 2013. What's more, there is no evidence for influx or efflux of water from Lake Vostok. This constant replenishment from the melting ice means the water in the lake may be relatively young, just thousands of years old, well, according to ice core studies. But the true age of the lake water is unknown. The constant replenishment from melting ice means the water in the lake may be relatively young, just thousands of years old, as some scientists believe. Researchers have mapped Lake Vostok shape with remote sensing techniques such as seismic soundings and ice-penetrating radar. Lake Vostok is much shallower on one end than the other, with the two basins separated by a ridge. Some scientists think the ridge could be a hydrothermal vent, similar to the ocean floor black smokers that teem with excuse me please tube worms. The long narrow lake may lie in a rift valley similar to Lake Baikal in Russia. I want you to pay attention to my video about Mariana's Trench and other deep water trenches and all this activity in the last few years around it by China, Russia, United States and Japan. There's something going on down below and you should pay attention to it. And apparently now there is a connection to Lake Vostok. Geothermal heat from the earth keeps the temperature of the lake water hovering about 27 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 3 degrees Celsius, scientists believe. The weighty pressure of the overlying ice keeps the lake liquid despite its below freezing temperature. I hope I've described the lake enough, but I'll continue. In the 1990s, an international team of scientists discovered microbes in the frozen lake water collected above Lake Vostok's liquid surface, called accretion ice. The top half-inch or 1 centimeters of the lake surface freezes onto the flowing ice sheet above the lake. some scientists believe. Analysis of the life forms suggests that Lake Vostok may harbor a unique ecosystem based on chemicals in rocks instead of sunlight, living in isolation for hundreds of thousands of years. The types of organisms international scientists found suggested they derive their energy from minerals presented in the lake and sources from the underlying bedrock. More recent studies of genetic material in Vostok's accretion ice revealed snippets of DNA from a wide variety of organisms related to single-celled creatures found in lakes, oceans, and streams. These so-called extremophiles could mimic life on other moons and planets, such as Jupiter's icy moon Europa. Now, let's talk about 2013. And the July mission of that year to remote Antarctica was more than just interesting. Russian scientists weren't sure what they would find when they finally successful in sinking their drill into the Lake Vostok. Some experts even theorized that the lake could give them clues to what life might be present on distant ice-covered moons of Saturn and Jupiter. The water in Vostok could be filled with deadly, poisonous bacteria, prehistoric sea monsters, humanoids maybe, or just could be completely lifeless. Of course, none of this came true. That's the official explanation. Samples recovered from mud, ice, and water have delivered more than 3,500 different types of DNA. Most have been classified as bacteria, but approximately 5% of this DNA sequences show signs of more complex organisms, such as single-celled eukaryotes and archaea, arthropods, mollusks, and water fleas. The most compelling find, however, according to Western media, was a bacteria commonly found in the digestive tracts of fish, leading to the idea that there may be some type of fish present in the lake, which is more than 1,000 feet deep. And in paper published on June 26, 2013, in the journal PLOS One, international researchers discussed the thousands of species they identified in Lake Vostok through DNA and RNA sequences. The researchers took samples from two areas of the lake, the southern main basin and the near embayment on the southwestern end of the lake. By sequencing the DNA and RNA taken from the samples of accretion ice, the team discovered far more complexity than anyone thought, said Dr. Scott Rogers, professor of biological sciences and head of the scientific team. He is at the so-called Bowling Green State University. It really shows the tenacity of life and how organisms can survive in places where a couple dozen years ago we thought nothing could survive, according to Dr. Rogers. In addition to fungi and two species of archaea, single-celled organisms that tend to live in extreme environments, the researchers identified thousands of bacteria, including some that are commonly found in the digestive systems of fish, crustaceans, and annelid worms. They discovered psychrophiles, organisms that live in extreme cold, and heat-loving thermophiles, which suggests the presence of hydrothermal vents deep in the lake. According to Rogers, the presence of both marine and freshwater species supports the theory that the lake once was connected to the ocean and that the freshwater was supplied by overriding glacier. The embayment contained the most biological activity, with the largest number of species identified. After 2 years of computer analysis, the final results revealed that Vostok Lake contains a diverse set of microbes, as well as some multicellular organisms. Roger emphasizes that the team erred strongly on the conservative side while reporting their findings. They chose to include only those sequences which were absolutely certain came from the accretion ice. Because of this, Roger believes that there are most likely a multitude of others from the lake, opening the door to further research. Well, years went by. Apparently, Russia did not conduct any drilling-related activity at Vostok in 2015-16. But I have some other information, and we'll talk about it. And the only thing they presented at the 2016 Antarctic Treaty meeting in Santiago, Chile, was a report containing the results of laboratory experiments conducted at the Kurchatov Institute in Moscow in an effort to resolve concerns about potential contamination of the lake water. These experiments indicated that using a layer of silicon at the bottom of the drill hole would prevent chemical contamination of the lake water due to clathrate hydrate formation from the Freon 141b and kerosene drilling fluid mixture. The researchers also concluded that this method was superior to hot water drilling technology proposed by British and American researchers, as hot water drilling would make biological thermal contamination of the lake more likely. They also mentioned that the use of hot water drilling would require a powerful plant producing several megawatts, which is a practical impossibility. As part of the drilling operations, the 5G3 well continued to be drilled to depths of 3725.86 meters. A new mechanical well expander was tested. In the depth interval of 3649 to 3650 meters, the well was expanded to a diameter of 163 millimeters in order to direct the projectile into an old well filled with frozen lake water. The shallow well VK16 was completed at a depth of 70 meters. Across and excellent quality core was obtained at the depth of the well, covering the age from the beginning of our era to the present day according to the age of the deposits. Core samples and other samples were prepared for the transportation to the Progress Station by transport trip. Well VK16 was mothballed and drilling rig was transported to Vostok Station and prepared for use in field conditions. Observations of the isotopic composition of the precipitation and surface snow, as well as regular measurements of the temperature of the snow sequence to a depth of 100 meters and the Thermokosa complex were continued. Laboratory analysis of the air hydrates in ancient samples completed ice on the core of the European project. The study of hydrates of well 5G-3 depth interval 3460-3538 meters of Vostok Station were continued. The data obtained show that the age of atmospheric ice in the core at the depth of 3500 to 3538 meters is significantly greater than 1 million years, which made it possible to draw a preliminary conclusion that in the area of the ice sharing B, where the ice flow line originating to the deep the well at Vostok Station apparently lies the oldest continental ice on our planet. What I just told you was taking place in 2018. This is the latest official report, official meaning from the academy that is involved and the universities and scientific centers. In St. Petersburg Institute for Nuclear Science laboratory, they selected samples of ice fragments from cores in sealed evacuated containers for subsequent isotope analysis of light and noble gases from ice. And samples were taken from the course, from the depths of 3,724 and 3,725 meters. And course were prepared for shipment to St. Petersburg. Okay, so this was the last official, using bureaucratic language, expedition. Now I want to talk a little bit about two Russian, one actually Baltic, but he's a Russian, explorers who pay very close attention and have great experience in Lake Vostok. In 2017, German Moskvitin, the only polar explorer from the Baltic countries, told the Russian radio interviewers how he got to the Antarctica area, why he was drawn there again and again, and with whom he met there. I am not going to go into a full interview. We'll use some other snippets for other programs, for other videos. Right now what's interesting is he was asked about UFOs. And he says, look, UFOs are also observed in Moscow, but they were also seen in the Antarctic sky. But there were no direct contacts with aliens, extraterrestrials, or female aliens. And how did it look? A point, a dot in the sky, but not a plane or a rocket. It rushed around about the horizon, this strange dot. It was during the night, and there could be no aircraft in the sky, according to Moskvitin. Then he talked about history and mentioned that in 1937, 1938, in those years, with the blessing of Hitler, there was a German polar expedition to the shores of the to Antarctica, which was carried out on aircraft, steamship aircraft. German pilot Schirmacher found an oasis which was named in his honor, and at that place, just exactly at that place, later this Russian station Novolazarovskaya was built. It's about 100 kilometers from the shores of the ocean. That's interesting too. Schirmacher named the oasis that he found as Novaya Shvabia or New Shvabia, and did not land, but threw about Nazi badges and signs and flew away. And after that, of course, we know that World War II took place. But then he was asked about other objects, if he found something else. He says, we didn't find any secret objects, but there are natural under ice tunnels used by seals. And then he made a mistake, because he said the Arctic, Moskvitin recalls, is not a military zone. Animals and even land cannot be brought in here so as not to bring alien bacteria. These are biological safety rules. So instead of saying Antarctica, he said Arctic. Interesting. But now I want to present Alexei Yekaikin. He is the leading Russian researcher of the St. Petersburg Arctic and Antarctic Research Institute. 15 times he had been in Antarctica. He personally participated in the drilling of the famous subglacial Lake Vostok. I like him for a number of reasons. He is very intelligent. He's been educated in Russia and in France, very outspoken, and about these views and some others. He's just an interesting person to monitor, so to say, to see what he writes, and I do. Because he doesn't shy away from stating his knowledge. Whether he states everything, that's another question. So he was asked, you have been to 15 expeditions to the Antarctica area. The first time at the age when you were 23 years old. What struck you when you arrived there? And he replies, there are absolutely no smells. There is only snow everywhere. There is nothing to smell. All smells are made by human being, kerosene, machine oil, cooking food, and so on. But Antarctica is not the harshest place on Earth. You can live quite comfortably at the station. Mountain expeditions are much more difficult and dangerous. He was asked, what was the biggest hardship in the expeditions? And he says, it's hard to say that because even the internet is present there, although very limited. And from some points of view, the expedition is more comfortable than being in civilization. 2 months without email. Sometimes, however, I wanted to go out and take a walk around St. Petersburg, but there is no time for it. You work, and you're busy all the time. So they're asking him, did you ever feel an unaccountable fear as shown in movies? On the contrary, he says, it is much calmer there than on the mainland. In Antarctica, you can be afraid of certain things. For example, getting lost in a snowstorm when you walked 5 meters from the vehicle and fell into thick snow. You panic, you start to run, and you freeze forever. But in general, I know only one case of death at the Vostok station, in a fire at a diesel power station. He was asked, do polar researchers pass a psychological test before being sent to Antarctica? And he says, you mean how the astronauts have compatibility tests? Well, we have one thing in common. We work for a long time and live in a closed space. But it's easier for us. Each polar explorer has a separate room. If something happens, just close the door and don't communicate with anyone. We don't pass special tests separately, but a physical examination and a psychologist are required. And what about panic attacks? And he says, it is impossible to identify the tendency towards them with the tests given. In an extreme situation, everyone behaves differently. Once our colleague needed to stay at the station for the winter, but he realized that he didn't want to do so. So he cried, he screamed, he scratched the door, but then it passed. He felt sad, but later he just calmed down. Is it true that polar explorers drink alcohol to relieve stress and not freeze? No, that's not true. If you go out into the cold after drinking, you will freeze much faster. Alcohol in no way warms you. But you can drink at the end of the day. There are such drinks at the station. Is everything alright with the other food too? Well, we don't have fresh milk like the French have at Concordia station. But in general, there is enough food, it is nutritious, and there is a lot of it. 10 years ago, even lobsters were available to be consumed. And now this is not like that, but it's still also quite satisfying. Then he was asked, tell us about the last expedition from which you returned on February 18th. And he says, this season we had 3 tasks. The first is testing the drilling process in different drilling fluids for the future project of Lake Vostok. Now, the well is filled with a mixture of kerosene and freon. This liquid forms solid hydrates in contact with water. They interfere with the study. Here is a new environmentally friendly liquid, special silicone we have experienced this season. The second task is to make a branch from the main well bore and explore the ancient ice. This new project is funded by the Russian Science Foundation. And the third is climate research over the past 2,000 years. And they're asking him about the last information piece he presented. Is this true that the ice in Antarctica is melting and the level of oceans is rising? And the scientist says, yes. In general, the volume of ice on the planet is now declining, and especially strongly in Greenland. But half of the increase in level is due to thermal expansion of water. It heats up and increases in volume. For the second half, the melting of the glaciers is really responsible. Until the 1990s, it was mainly water from mountain glaciers. From the beginning of the 21st century, Greenland has been giving volumes, which is melting around the entire perimeter. In Antarctica, where the temperature rarely rises to 0, nothing melts, but icebergs break off its shelves. Now, in many places, especially in West Antarctica, the speed of ice movement is increasing. It flows faster and faster into the ocean. over 100 meters in 20 years, the ice level has dropped in some places. This is not to say that this is directly related to climate change. More complex processes are taking place. Very interesting. And now, one more question about the future of Antarctica. What do you think of polar tourism? He says it's already developing and this is not bad. But there is an incredibly fragile ecosystem, even more fragile than in the Arctic. It is more difficult to get to Antarctica. But even so, there are more and more tourists every year. In the future, this will become a problem. It will be necessary to literally make paths and prohibit them from turning around even for a meter. Meaning, stay on the path, don't walk off. Then he was asked about the Lake Vostok. Were you present at the historic moment when you reached the surface of the lake? He says both times, in 2012 and 2015. They're asking, weren't you afraid that you would get to something terrible, some kind of pathogenic bacteria? And he says, it only sounds naive. In fact, these assumptions were also made by serious specialists. Some bacteria exist there. More complex life forms are unlikely, but each organism has its own ecological niche and survival conditions. So on the surface, these bacteria are likely to die. What did studies of water samples show? Did you find any organic matter there? And he says, there was a lot of organics, traces of kerosene from the filling fluid. Therefore, they were not suitable for microbiological research. So far, there have been no scientific publications on these subjects, which means that nothing sensational has been found. However, Sergei Bulat, head of the cryoastrobiology laboratory of the St. Petersburg Institute of Nuclear Physics, found DNA fragments and fragments of bacteria not previously described in the samples. But this is not proof of the existence of something surprising in Lake Vostok. Hypothetically, you can find bacteria known to science in any puddle. Then he was asked, can you drink water from Lake Vostok? He's laughing. Yeah, I drank it. It is unsalted and smells like kerosene. By the way, the story of how the then Minister of Natural Resources of Russia, Yuri Trutnev, brought this water to President Putin in 2012 is not entirely true. There could be no water from Lake Vostok in that flask. The minister left the station before we reached the water. Here is the story, and it tells you about official information. On February 4, Vostok station was visited by Yuri Trutnev, Minister of Natural Resources and Ecology of the Russian Federation. Trutnev took the first water sample from the subglacial Lake Vostok and delivered it to Moscow. On February 10, he presented Vladimir Putin, Prime Minister of the Russian Federation at the time, with a small glass canister containing the first sample of the prehistoric water, a yellowish liquid with the inscription Lake Vostok, more than 1 billion years of age. So this was not true. How surprising. Now he was asked, can sensations be expected on Lake Vostok? Can you tell why dinosaurs became extinct? And the scientist says, Yekaikin, there is such an opportunity. It may well turn out that at the bottom of the lake there are deposits of the Mesozoic era, which will tell a lot about the dinosaurs. And indeed, the Antarctic has been studied only along the edges. Even the white spots on it have not all disappeared. Yes, sensations can be expected. This is what he said. He also mentioned in his other publications that such conditions as in Lake Vostok are not found in any body of water on the planet. It is located under a layer of ice 3,770 meters thick. The water temperature at the surface is about -3, and in the bottom layer it is higher due to geothermal sources. Naturally, there is a very high pressure. However, the first two factors are not so unique. Bacteria survive at very high and at very low temperatures. and at the bottom of the ocean the pressure is much higher. It's something else. Firstly, there is complete darkness, which means that life forms that receive energy as a result of photosynthesis are not and cannot be there. Secondly, this is the strangest thing, a lot of oxygen is dissolved in the lake water, and in such concentration it is poison for absolutely all forms of bacteria. If life is discovered in the water of Lake Vostok, it will be a sensation. That is why now the main emphasis on the research is placed on biology. This is what he was saying years ago. In general, about 400 such objects have been discovered in Antarctica, and all of them need to be investigated. Moreover, there are probably more of them. There are still many blank spots on the map of the continent. Attempts of such studies have already been conducted. For example, the Americans were drilling through the reservoir that they investigated turned out not to be a lake, but part of the bay. The British attempted to open subglacial lake hidden under an ice thickness of 2 kilometers. However, they could not drill the well. So you're getting different information, of course, through different years, and it sounds to me like a lot is not being told, and something is being preserved from general knowledge simply because either they don't know or we are not ready, in their opinion, scientific, let's say, about the discoveries made down there. It's not monsters, I believe, but they do found a collection, and this is very important to the hydrothermal vents and maybe deeper tunnels and structures in the ocean and Antarctica. We can only guess. Now, so that you know, people and goods arrive in the Vostok station in 2 ways. People usually fly by airplane from the Progress station, according to Ikaikin, and goods, and this is first of all diesel fuel, which requires a lot of life for the station, as well as building materials, equipment, and food. They're delivered by tracked vehicles from the same Progress station, and the entire 1400 kilometer journey from the coast to Vostok takes about 2 weeks. So it's not easy to get there, and we'll keep monitoring, because I believe that more work will be done there soon, and as you know, other nations are very much interested in getting to Antarctica. So I ask you, if you like my research, please kindly support it through PayPal or Patreon links. It's not the easiest time now for me due to some reasons, and I wish I could make videos maybe of my best. And soon I'll help you, I will bring more information to you about Russian and Eurasian paranormal. Thank you.